All right, Nathan, this is your test. It sounds like I'm working out because I can hear myself echoing through the canyon, as these ranchers might say. I wanted to welcome you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate every single one of you coming out this late in the evening to hear this panel discuss open range laws, how it relates to the burros, the cattle, wildlife, and our residences, who are areas like Dolan Springs and Golden Valley and Meadview that are being populated and growing, but not yet at the stage that we can do much with the laws the way they are now. So, you know, y'all know that Mohave County has a long history of ranching and mining. And, you know, our residents relish living in the land of the free in Arizona. A lot of you moved here from other places because this is the Wild West, and we're still free, for the most part, from regulation. Cattle and burros don't seem to fit into the mold of the Wild West anymore, and that's what we're here tonight to discuss, is how do we live with the laws the way they are now, or is it necessary that we change these laws, like a lot of you believe that it's now the time for us to change open range laws. So that's going to be a good part of the discussion here tonight. And just full disclosure, I want to let you know that my husband is a retired rancher. He was also retired from law enforcement after ranchers. So he's been out of ranching for decades, but his great-great-grandfather came here in the early 1880s and began a long respected career as a rancher in early Mohave County. He settled in eastern Mohave County up by Signal, if anybody knows where Signal is. Up by Burro Creek as you're going toward Phoenix on Highway 93. So there were many generations of ranchers that followed that. So, you know, just full disclosure, my husband's family are longtime ranchers in Mohave County. So I was talking to him last night, and he said in early Mohave County days, there wasn't very many people, and there was even fewer cars. And it was easy to tell one ranch from another because there was a barbed wire fence and a wire gate, and you had to get out of your vehicle, open that gate, drive through it, and then close it again. And then the ranchers discovered that they could make cattle guards out of wood timbers, and they'd lay these horizontal across a big pit that they'd dig. And you know, the thought was that the cows were smart enough not to go over this cattle guard, and that worked for a while. And then mining slowed down in Mohave County, and they started using recycled rails from the mines with their little rail cars. And that worked pretty good until started getting heavy trucks, and the heavy trucks would bend these rails. So that led into getting commercially made cattle guards, much like what you see today. So as you drove down the narrow roads in Mohave County, you had to stop and open and shut these gates no matter how many times the barbed wire cut your fingers. And I, for one, hated those old gates. So the cattle guards replaced that, and now we use manufactured cattle guards. But Mohave County continues to experience growing pains from the old days to where we are now. And things aren't working the way they did 50 years ago, and we're here to discuss that. So in front of you tonight, behind the dais, is a panel that I put together to help answer questions that you have and to relay what the actual laws are in Arizona, what they mean, and what you can do as residents and citizens to change those laws if you don't like them. So we're a country of laws. We live by the laws, and if you don't like them, you change them. It sounds pretty simple, but it's pretty complex, and Senator Borelli hopefully will enlighten you as to what it takes to change the law. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Gary Watson, and he's going to explain how things are going to work tonight, and then we'll ask the panel to self-introduce themselves. Again, thank you very much for coming, and I hope this is useful information that you get tonight. And it is also being live streamed, so you may be on a video tonight, so thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bishop.
You're welcome.
You've done an excellent job putting this together. And I think I'll take the liberty just to introduce the panel, if that's okay.
That's even better. You go for it.
All right. We have Todd Davison from our enforcement. We have Wes Bauer from Mohave County Sheriff's Office, Range Enforcement. We have Anita Waite, local rancher. Andrew Brisky in a tie that I've never seen before from the University of Arizona Extension Service. Velma is from the field supervisor from the Arizona Game and Fish, Velma Holt. Then we have Alvin Stump from the ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation. And then our own Steve Latoski with Mohave County Road Department. Senator Borelli, great to have you here. Thank you so much. And of course, our legal person, Ryan Esplin. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this evening. What I'd like to do is outline the different forces that are happening in Golden Valley. I went out and spent a great deal of time with Travis Holyoke. He's the person that owns the permit for BLM to run his stock on that range. And he explained to me a number of different factors that are occurring out there. So there are a number of influences that are occurring out there, kind of creating the perfect storm. We've all heard about the highway accidents, probably as many as 10, maybe more. We just heard about another one on Legend Ranch Road just here lately. So we know that there are problems out there. And what I'd like to do is show you the general habitat of where this permit is. So if I can get our people back at IT to show the first picture here, this is the general habitat of the permittee. You see there's not a lot of forage, and they're in great competition with the burros. There's a close-up of the forage. It's generally fairly poor habitat, and that's one of the reasons why the permit is so large. Here's the permittee's main water. You can see there's sufficient water there. These pictures were only taken 2 weeks ago. So there's ample water for those animals in that area. This is about 4 miles south of Shinneramp. The other influencing factor that we have are burros. And the burros in that area have climbed in their population numbers from the original 200 for that permit. Now there's over 800. There's 4 burros, or I'm sorry, there's 6 burros for every cow that's on that permit. So there's a lot of competition for the forage, and that's part of the movement of these cattle. We have 2 other influences there. We have people that are putting out water in the areas that are residential. And those folks think that they're doing a great favor or a great service to the animals in the area. And what that does is when the cattle are in competition for forage and water, they'll move up to those water areas. The other influence is the four-wheeler people that cut fences. I know that the Short family has a difficult time keeping their fences up. My outfit's not too far away. I don't run cattle, but I raise a few horses. And it's always a challenge to make sure that the fences are up, the gates are closed, and that's another influencing factor. So we have a number of influences, a number of factors that are influencing this problem. Now, one of the solutions that we came up with from Mohave County was the use of reflective ear tags. And that makes for an easier target to hit, possibly. And some ranchers have used this method. I'm not sure that there's a complete buy-in from everybody, but it's something that Mohave County is attempting to do to solve the problem. So I think that sums up all the different factors that are occurring at the moment. And from that, we'll start entertaining the questions that you've written down. So
all them cows are facing this way. What about when they turn the other way?
Pardon me, sir?
All them cows are facing you.
Well, I think they were just facing the camera. Thank you. Thank you very much. We can start with the questions.
Okay, first off, I'd like to introduce Richard Hamilton. He's here in the audience tonight. He's with the Mohave County Farm and Livestock Association. So, Richard, would you stand up and be recognized?
If you don't mind, for the association, if I speak before anybody asks any questions, if I speak before the questions, I might be able to answer quite a few of them.
Actually, Mr. Hamilton, we're going to take the questions and
Throwing that out.
yeah, we'll give you an opportunity to speak after the questions are answered, and we may answer them as well. So thank you very much, and we will call on you if we need you. And Anita Waite is here in our panel, and she can help us out. So the first question I have was emailed to me, and this is from Elsie Heron. She says, it's come to my attention that many years ago, one of the ranchers south of 68 in Golden Valley removed several water locations for his cattle, which were within 4 miles of Highway 68. He shut them down so that cattle would need to stay south of Highway 68 and away from the high speeds that people travel on the highway in an effort to keep them safe, and the result is the public is safer too. Since that time, at least 3 do-gooder residents north of Uncar alignment have started to maintain water for the ranchers' cattle. There were many more when approached and asked to quit, and they did so. The do-gooder residents have been asked to cease providing water for the cattle and luring them into an unsafe area. The resident has refused to stop providing water. In his refusal, he's refusing to stop interfering with the rancher's management of his cattle. Elsie's question is there a legal means to prevent residents from putting out feed and waters for livestock and or wildlife? So I think this probably goes to, well, who wants to take this first question? Anita, why don't you start us off?
Okay. Is this mic working okay?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, for one thing, whenever the public interferes with our management on our ranches, it causes all kinds of problems. Our cows then are not where they're supposed to be. It creates problems like this particular incident. The cows are being drawn closer to 68, which could cause a problem for cows getting on the highway. So the public needs to be part of the solution of this problem, rather than blaming the rancher, but they need to help. They need to work with the rancher on not cutting fences, not leaving gates open, not feeding the cattle so the cattle are where they're not supposed to be, not giving the cattle water. The rancher has a handle on how his cattle need to be moved through his range and really does not need the help of the public.
Okay, thank you very much. And Velma, I'd like to ask if you could elaborate a little bit more as to whether or not there's a legal means to stop someone from watering and feeding livestock and wildlife.
Yeah, so we do have a law against feeding. Unfortunately, and I can't remember exactly, but the population of the city has to be at a certain level. So the only 2 cities that applies to in the state are Phoenix and Tucson. So at this point, it is not illegal in Mohave County to put out water or feed unless you're hunting over the feed for wildlife. Although we do strongly discourage people from doing that sort of thing. They do create nuisance animals that lose their fear of humans. That's an easy way for, if you've got a diseased animal, to spread that disease. So we do strongly discourage it, but at this point we do not have a law.
Okay, and I think that population number is 30,000 in population, and the area has to be contiguous to an incorporated city. Mr. Espin, can you confirm that?
I don't know if that's all the terms, but I trust that what you said is accurate. The only thing I'd say is there is a law for unlawful feeding of wildlife, but that's not what we're talking about here. That would be a different issue. Correct? Yeah.
It could relate to feeding the wild burros, and I think that will be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and burros are not considered wildlife, so it wouldn't be addressed under Arizona Game and Fish Law.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, Supervisor Watson, do you have a question? You want to go back and forth with these?
Sure. Probably this is best defined by either Attorney Esplin or our Senator Borelli. Certainly. Please do. The bottom of mic, there's a small lever.
Yeah. This pertains to game and fish. It was stated that the burros are not considered wildlife. Could you expand on that? Explain why they're not considered wildlife?
So they are not native animals, the way that deer, elk, that sort of thing are. Basically, they came from a domestic situation with probably the minors, that sort of thing. We consider them to be feral, domestic, equine animals. So.
And that's because it's federal statute?
Yes.
Okay. Or guidelines?
Yeah, and I mean, we do have definitions for wildlife, and the burros are not considered wildlife.
It's federal. Okay, thank you.
Federally protected and not an indigenous species, correct? Thank you. What is the definition of a no-fence district? Anyone care to jump on that one?
I can jump on that.
Please.
So in Arizona, we have what is called a no-fence district. And let me back up just a little bit. The law back hundreds of years ago in England and when it came over to America was that it was the livestock owner's responsibility to take care of their own animals. That was kind of the general rule, what we call the common law. Out here in the West, we didn't like that. And in the West, we went on the opposite and we said, you know what? Here in the West, we're gonna reverse that and say that it's incumbent upon the landowners to keep the animals out. And so basically here in the West, we say that if you want to protect your property, you need to put up a fence. And so we have open range. Well, to reverse that again, I'm sorry I'm kind of going back and forth, but to reverse that, you can create a no-fence district. And a no-fence district puts the responsibility upon the livestock owner. And it says, okay, in a no-fence district, you don't have to put up fences. And the livestock owner is responsible to keep their livestock outside of the landowner's land. And if the livestock then go into a landowner's land, then the owner of the livestock will be responsible. That's a no-fence district. And there's certain ways in which you can create that no-fence district. Here in Mohave County, there is one no-fence district to my knowledge. It is in the area that it encompasses the Mohave Valley Irrigation and Drainage District, the MVIDD. That is the only location in Mohave County that has a no-fence district. So if livestock get loose in the MVIDD area, then the owner of the livestock could be responsible for any damage caused to the landowner. In all the other places that are outside of that no-fence district, so the rest of Mohave County, it is incumbent upon the landowners to create a fence or to put up a lawful fence to keep the animals out. So if an animal goes in, if your livestock goes into there, then if there was a fence up, then you could go after the livestock owner. But if there's no fence, then most likely you're, I don't know if I can say the words here in open forum, but you know what I mean. So, does that make sense?
Somewhere up the creek without a paddle?
Yes, that's a nicer way to say it.
Very good, thank you. Next question I'll send over to Steve Latoski. Have you ever driven toward Meadview at night around 6 or 7 p.m.? And why would the county tell drivers to drive with their high beams on? Steve?
The Public Works Department has looked at the instances of cattle and vehicle collisions over quite an extensive period. We've been looking at what has been done successfully in practice, as well as thinking outside the box in terms of solutions that we can put forward as staff. One of the emphasis areas very much not only to the cattle vehicle conflict, but also other types of roadway risks, such as geometric alignment, etc., would be to educate motorists and to remind them, quite frankly, on the use of high beams and other types of devices that may better assist drivers in recognizing that hazards exist. And again, the broad brush here is that it's not only cattle, but also other roadway hazards. And as a result, we have put forward in certain high impact areas signing to remind drivers to consider using their high beams, of course very prudently when such use of high beams dictate. But that is just one of a toolbox of initiatives that perhaps I'll be touching on as the evening goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. We've talked about a no-fence district, and this question, the person wants to know what constitutes a legal fence. So, Mr. Esplin, I think this one goes to you again. If you could explain what a legal fence is according to Arizona revised statutes.
Sure. So again, if you're not in a no-fence district, which most of us are, so I'm just going to say we are not in a no-fence district, except if you're an MVIDD. So for everywhere else, if you have a lawful fence and the livestock break into it, then you may be able to sue the owner of the livestock. Okay. So that's why that lawful fence is very important. It's very important that you have it. And there is a definition of a lawful fence, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but if you look in there and some of the stuff that we provided, if you Google lawful fence, you'll find it. But I don't want to go through the technical stuff, well, I guess I will. Sorry. But it's built with posts, and it just kind of describes how it is. I don't know how to describe it without reading the whole thing. You have to have 4 barbed wires of the usual type, tightly stretched and secured. They have to be at certain intervals of 12, 22, and 32 inches. If the posts are set more than 1 rod apart, the wires should be supported by stays placed not more than 7 1/2 feet. So there's a definition, and you've got to be. If you see a good, solid, legitimate fence, it's probably going to meet the definition. Let's put it that way. If it looks like a good fence, you're probably going to meet it.
Okay, this person, it's a 3-part question. So they go on to say open range laws say a fence that will deter cattle. And if a heavy duty chain link is up and cattle break it, who's responsible for the damage? And Mr. Esplin, I know there's case law on this. I talked to Judge John Taylor that says that if someone came into his court with a case where maybe they had a chain link fence up and the rancher was challenged that this was a lawful fence because it's stronger than most chain link fences or whatever his defense is. The judge said he would need to speak to experts that would testify as to whether or not this chain link fence or decorative iron fence was strong enough to deter cattle to meet ARS standards. So.
That's correct. I mean, if there is the legal definition I was trying to explain, but then if you fall into there, it says all fences constructed other than as provided in subsection A or other materials equally as strong and otherwise effective to turn livestock as the fences. So if it's something that's strong enough to deter livestock away, then it would meet the definition of fence for those purposes.
Okay, and then why not use painted cattle guards? This question comes all the way from Meadview. So either ADOT, Alvin, if you would take that first, and then Steve and Latoski as a follow-up.
Okay, I can share some of my experience with this. ADOT hasn't used painted cattle guards, but over in the other part of the district, Yavapai County has used some in certain places, and they haven't been as effective. One example is over in Mare, where we recently just put in 2 cattle guards because the cattle were walking right across the painted cattle guards. So that's what my experience has been.
As far as the county, we have seen more or less similar types of levels of effectiveness with such cattle guards.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Watson.
My turn. This question's from Jim Seckler. For the town hall open range next Monday, how many encounters have there been? We can't hear you, Gary. Encounters. How many encounters have there been? I believe that there's been close to 10 on Highway 68, and I heard just of one on Legend Ranch Road just here of lately. So probably in the neighborhood of 11, Jim Seckler. Hope that answers your question. This question comes from Ms. Morgaine. Why are you, as the Mohave County Board of Supervisors, not pressuring our state legislatures to change ARS 11-811 related to county zoning and power and authority? If the section limiting the county's authority to zone, rezone, or agricultural, mining, metallurgical, railroad, and cattle were removed, the county could make adjustments to open range in Mohave County. Well, we'll ask Senator for an answer. Senator Borelli?
What was that
ARS 11-811. Related to county zoning. I believe what she's trying to indicate that the Mohave County has the authority to do something in this situation with zoning.
Well, we kind of come from that mindset of local control is best suited for the community, is rather than 200 or 300 miles away from the community of the state legislature. The county has the authority to amend their ordinances as long as it doesn't conflict with it. But if you have the authority, go for it. If you don't, then obviously, if you need me to change statute to give you more authority for local control, I'm all for that. So, because you all know me, I like to put more local control closest to the people is the best way to govern.
Thank you, Senator. Probably a couple statements that I'll go ahead and read. They're not really questions, but I'll read them.
Supervisor Watson, I think Anita wanted to chime in on that last question.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to address this a little bit about changing the open range laws. For one thing, these ranches are all cut up, and every other section is private in a lot of the ranches. There are a few that are not. And to go ahead and force the rancher to fence out every piece of land that is owned would absolutely bankrupt the ranchers. Now, the agriculture in this state is $23.3 billion. So when you talk about eliminating the open range law, which would break several of the ranchers, this would definitely impact the state's economics. So the cattle industry is a very important industry to this state. And we need to work together with the people who have bought in the middle of our cattle ranches. These were ranches. And then the public has taken, or whoever took advantage of selling off their private land within 40-acre parcels, has created a situation to where we need to work together for solutions, not get rid of one of our important economics. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Anita. I have a couple here. They're not really questions, but I'll go ahead and read them. They're from the gentleman on the front row there. Just how effective do you expect this meeting to be in view of the fact that you really don't want to hear from us? Well, we're hearing from you. We're having a meeting. We've got a number of people here that will take your notes and do what they can do about them. That's Mr. Westfall, is that correct? Thank you. Next person is Chuck Hundley. I spoke to him before the meeting. My wife hit a cow on Highway 68. My new car cost $15,000. for a new car and a number of expenses for your wife. Is that correct? You didn't think I was going to read it, did you? Next question is proposed by Barbara Bell. I don't know that it's a question but a statement, but I'll go ahead and read it. The starving cattle bent the bedding T-post and dragged their, I'm sorry. All right. The starving cattle bent the metal T-post and dragged their bodies across the barbecue wire and destroyed our fruit trees. Since they can bend metal, how are we supposed to protect our property? I think we've already explained that a properly constructed fence will keep the animals out. You have to put a gate on it, it has to be 4-wire, and it has to be T-posts, at least every 15 feet. I believe that's what the distance is.
And the gate has to be closed.
Is there a law to protect the starving cattle on the west side of Golden Valley, which is the dry side where nothing grew this year? I don't know that there's a law protecting the cattle other than that of economics. Does anyone sitting at the dais have any further to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add. There's the animal cruelty statutes. If you treat an animal cruelty, then there is criminal prosecutions.
Criminal prosecution for animal cruelty. So you could report that to Mohave County if you feel that that's the case. Yeah. You want to do some more?
Absolutely. I have a question here. Why is an area with 17,000 residents and a 4-lane highway considered a good area for open range, i.e. Golden Valley? This question is proposed by Mr. Tom Hale. Okay, I'm not sure Golden Valley population is correct at 17,000, but we'll go with that number. And let me see, Alvin, Stump, it's your highway. Let's start with you.
Okay, sure. Well, for ADOT, our preferences always would be to just fence a right-of-way, and that way that's the safest thing to keep the livestock out. The challenge becomes in a growing community like Golden Valley, where you got a mix of commercial and residential areas right along the highway where there's not the opportunity to fence the right-of-way like we would normally. And so that's where it becomes a challenge for us, because we're not able to, I mean, we can't just fence across all the driveways and put gates there and expect them to stay closed. And so that's where it does. If there's no back fencing around these areas, it's hard for us, and about all we can do is put up signs warning for animals.
Okay, let me throw this in myself. Are there any plans to repair the fences along Highway 68 in Golden Valley and maybe install more cattle guards on the side roads?
We've looked at it quite a bit. There's like, I think there's like 21 streets and driveways. So when you look at the cost of installing cattle guards at each one of those, it's very expensive. And, you know, as far as fencing, we really need to fence to a point where we have full containment. Otherwise, obviously, cattle would just walk around the end of the fence. And so that's our challenge. Is we've been looking at the area. We've talked to Steve and Les, and still trying to come up with ideas ourselves.
Okay, good. I'm glad that it's in the conversation that's being talked about. I know I think it was last night or the night before, a four-wheeler ATV type person cut the fence on Highway 68, and I know that's a continuous problem. So I know a lot of folks out here are concerned about the fences being cut, and the ranchers, of course, can't go out and repair a state fence. I mean, that's not allowed, right?
Well,
or wrong.
We actually, you know, we have lots of areas, a lot of highway with that borders ranch land, and we do work with ranchers on that, because we don't have the means to go check our fence every day and do a thorough check, and so we definitely appreciate the help of ranchers when It can kind of help keep an eye on the fence as well.
Good. And then the other part of the question, area with 17,000 residents, I think that's already been asked and answered. You need 30,000 residences, and it has to be adjoined to an incorporated city. So, Mr. Hill, I hope that answered your question. And then a related question from an unknown person here is, what's the minimum number of acres that allows for open range? I think that's already been asked and answered. So let me take one more and then I'll turn it back over to you. This is from Rick Sherwood in Meadview. His question is, what will it take to remove Gold Basin from BLM's leased land for open range? I'm not sure we can have that question answered tonight. We don't have a representative from BLM unless anybody on the panel cares to tackle this one. What was that?
Can you repeat the question?
By the lease.
The question is, what will it take to remove Gold Basin from BLM's leased land for open range? Richard, did you want to answer that question?
By the lease.
Could you come to the microphone and answer it? Because we can't hear you.
Pretty loud. By the lease. If the lease comes up, you can purchase the lease, the permit.
No.
If it's for sale,
Yes.
you can purchase the permit and not run cattle on there. That's the only way. The open law is clear, as it was stated by our attorney.
Richard,
Our attorney. Yes.
the only way a cattle lease can be retired is by the Secretary of Interior. If you decide not to run cattle, you can run cattle. You can't run it for 3 years. You're allowed 3 years, but then you have to run cattle. The Grand Canyon Trust bought a cattle lease, thinking that they could retire it. The Grand Canyon Trust is now running cattle because that is the Taylor Grazing Act.
Okay, thank you, Anita. It just goes to show that we're all learning here, ranchers and residents, and the panel as well. So, Andrew.
So the question, if I'm hearing it right, is how to move land out of BLM ownership.
Yes.
And so the only way I really know how to do that is through land swaps. And so that takes a lot more effort, and I think you have to do an equal swap for value of land somewhere else. So BLM also, that land can be moved out of federal, but they'll have to get some more public land somewhere else in equal value.
Okay, and then a permittee that is leasing an allotment from BLM, if they are not living up to the lease agreements, I think that may be part of this question is, can that allotment be taken away from a rancher that's irresponsible? I think that's what this gentleman means. I'm not sure.
That is extremely difficult to do, to remove a lease from a rancher, because we hold the base waters, and the ownership to those base waters is what gives us the right to lease that land, that permit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that also stems from the mantra of BLM, multiple use for all their lands. I have a couple left, and then I'd like to ask the DS a couple questions myself, if I can. Next question proposed is Carmen. Gene, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I pray you have a good turnout. My questions are, what has changed? Glenn and I have lived here for 3 years, and I've never heard of a cow being hit on 68. Well, she evidently hasn't been reading the news. What is being done to fix the issue? I think we covered some of that. Can the valley be declared a no-fence district? I think we've covered that. I've heard that there are fences down and cattle guards that have been removed. Are they going to be repaired or replaced? I think Alvin has covered that. And as far as Mohave County is concerned, we have put up several cattle guards to protect areas. We did this in Valley Vista. And let me tell you how we did it. The cattle were coming in from the permittee just north of Valley Vista. And they were coming in and getting on the golf course and tearing the golf course up. So in dealing with the folks at Valley Vista, I recommended that if they would be responsible for the area that's fencing Valley Vista in, that we would put up 2 cattle guards. And so far, for 5 years, they've held up their end of the bargain, and we've held up our end of the bargain. And that was one way to fix it. I'm not sure that that could be done here, but it has been done. The last one I've got is not really a question, but I'll read it. This is from Danny Yates. What's up with cattle in subdivisions? Where's the kids in the schools, in the schoolyard? I was attacked by one in my driveway, and that's the gentleman up here with the cane. Didn't really have a question, but I just wanted to make sure people knew that you got hit by a cow.
It's a question. I want to know why they're in a subdivision where there's kids and housing.
Well, I believe we've tried to...
Country where there's houses 500 miles apart, it's in houses that are 20, 30 feet apart, where there's a lot of children playing on paved streets. And if I put up a, where am I going to be able to put a barbed wire fence up on a residential housing project?
I'm not sure, sir. I hope we're helpful in answering a number of your questions tonight. I've got a question for Todd Davison. Todd, when there's an animal hit, let's say a cow is hit, on one of the roads that Mohave County does maintenance on, what are the rules for the disposal of the animal?
Yeah, as far as we're concerned, if we're called, we want to make sure that whoever owns that cow or cattle takes care of it properly. It could be just dragged off the road, but then we usually get another call about having that carcass removed. So I don't know if Ryan might have more knowledge on that, or actually the sheriff's office too. They generally get the calls when they're first hit, and then we get the call after they're dragged off the roadway.
Thank you. And Wes, have you ever encountered a dead cow on the road? More than once?
No.
Oh, very good.
No, just kidding. Yes, it's unfortunately a very frequent thing throughout Mohave County. With our secondary roadways, secondary highways, we don't have the fencing, we don't have the cattle guards, and yes, we do have issues. We've got signage. The county's done a lot of work, especially this last year, to let the motoring public, as we all know here, we have a lot of out-of-country visitors that are pounding our roads, getting up to the Grand Canyon and all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of signs out now, I think our public is better aware, but we still have vehicle versus cows. One of the remedies for cattle removal is our coyote populations and our vultures and all those other things, and ranchers drag them out of the roadway where they're not visible to the public, and they're gone pretty quickly. I don't know if you folks have hit our roads. I'm not going to talk about Golden Valley because obviously it's a different situation there than our remoter areas. But the animals there, if they get hit, they're gone within just a few days, the whole thing. In your areas with more residents, obviously you're going to be concerned about smells, about drawing those types of scavengers and those types of things, and I get that. We notify the ranchers, and to my knowledge, the ranchers that I work with and that I've talked with, they respond very quickly, and they remove those carcasses to other areas away from the public if they are made aware. They don't always discover the animals that get hit, and it is up to us to make them aware. So when you guys see an animal hit, our public sees an animal hit, call the sheriff's office and we'll make sure to notify the ranchers so they can take action. But again, as Anita has said, and it's been said over and over again, it's got to be cooperation and tolerance from our community to help the ranchers to make sure that we make it a better living situation for everybody involved. And the ranchers, they are huge in our community with their support and with their revenue sources. And those things are important to all of us too. So it's a balance, and it's a tough balance. But there's a lot of cattle get hit. And again, it's awareness too. Make us aware so we can make them aware, and we can work together and get that taken care of.
Thank you, Wes. I did some investigation, and I talked to Travis Holyoke. And there was some complaints about cattle being just drug off on the private property. And I told Travis that that's not going to work. So we made arrangements to make sure that he could pick up those dead cattle off private property and take them to the dump. He just has to give the dump enough time to be prepared for that, because they need to dig a pretty good sized hole. But we made provisions for that. So if you get any kind of this happening on your private property, you can call me, you can call Gene, call Todd Davison. We want to get those animals off your private property. If it can be drug off down the road a few miles where it doesn't bother you, then that's an alternative too. If it's on your private property, you've got a right to get it off. Give us a call. We'll make sure it happens. And the rancher, Travis Holyoke, is fully prepared to work with us and to do that. So I just want you to know that we've been trying to solve this problem for quite some time. That wraps it up for me, I believe.
I don't think so. Marianne has another couple questions for you, but I'll take over for a little while. The next question is chain link fencing along highways to prevent crossing by animals. Are these fences paid for by ADOT? Number one. If ADOT does pay for it, why should landowners pay for fencing and not the state? And then the next question relating to that is, what happened to the cattle guards like at Estrella and Highway 68? So these are two different people asking almost the same question. Alvin, please.
Well, as far as the chain link fence, we have a specific location where that's at. I mean,
I think they may be thinking the animal crossings on Highway 93 and the interstates that go.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know who asked this question, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Was that your intent?
My question was, you were talking about 68 and it being too complicated to put up fencing.
I can't hear you. Can you come up to the mic, please? Just for a little clarification. Thank you.
Sure. The conversation was about, you were asking about putting up protection of fencing on 68 and the complexity of doing that because there's homes and driveways, et cetera. So I was trying to understand that type of fencing, is that a cost that ADOT pays for putting the fencing up like they do on 93 and on 40? So those big fences to keep wildlife and other animals from crossing and causing danger on a highway. Is ADOT paying for that?
Yes, thanks for the clarification. Yes, if the fencing on our right-of-way that we put up, yeah, we pay for it, whether it's normal game fence or if, like what you're referring to, those wildlife crossings. Yes, we pay for
So
them.
is that not possible at some extent along 68 or Pierce Ferry going out to Meadview or Stockton Hill Road? I mean, those are highways, those are roads. Would ADOT not be responsible for funding and putting that up versus the landowner having to try and put up a fence that they think is within the law limits that's going to protect them? I'm just trying to get clarification on when does the state pay for it? When does the landowner or the homeowner have to pay for it?
Well, for us, it's about being manageable. Like I said, there's like 20-something driveways and crossroads, and spending $75,000 to $100,000 on a cattle guard for each one of those gets pretty expensive. Plus, as you get into the commercial developments, people don't want a barbed wire fence across the front of their storefronts. And so that's where it becomes problematic for us. We have been spending a considerable amount of time looking at kind of what we can do to have some containment, and the real challenges, again, there's just, without having the back fencing around the residential and commercial area, we're not able to really come up with a way to have that containment needed.
So should we look at those things going forward when we're approving permits for new residential areas or new commercial areas? Or in the case of 68, I'll come back to that, is there not a way to work together between those businesses and ADOT to say, we will cover this amount of the expense if the folks out here that are mostly impacted could put this forward versus bearing the burden? Or how many cows or accidents does it going to take for us to do something? That's really my point.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. I appreciate your question.
And if I could, I'd like to add, typically what happens, like when we have a developing community, pretty soon they want to take down sections of fence or remove cattle guards because they got commercial property. And so, we look at their back fencing before we agree to it. Is there the acceptable back fencing? Are they committed to the back fencing? So.
And I think also part of the problem is you're representing the state of Arizona with state and interstates, highways, and the county has Pierce Ferry Road and Stockton Hill Road, and we don't have quite as much money as the state of Arizona. So Mr. Latoski, can you chime in on county responsibilities and what we can and can't do without raising taxes?
With regard to maintenance of any roadway, no matter the political jurisdiction, essentially the same philosophy of open range applies to us as administrating public right-of-ways on behalf of the public. Those rights-of-ways that for motor vehicle travel in the unincorporated area of the county that is not under state jurisdiction, we look at it from the same standpoint as a private property owner, whereby if the conflict is desired to be completely resolved, the county is responsible for fencing the right-of-way. And as Alvin had alluded to, the boundary by which it's just like anyone's own private property, our boundaries are simply the rights-of-ways limits of that particular roadway. So hence placing barbed wire in front of businesses, in front of residences. But I know with regard to Stockton Hill Road, Pierce Ferry Road, those roadways bisect largely rural and largely even undeveloped lands, but it becomes a cost issue for the county, quite honestly. Right-of-way fencing, the cost to erect is upwards of $70,000 a mile to fence both sides of the roadway, and that capital investment coupled with the maintenance burden simply is too great for the county to take on. So we've looked at some very specific driver-centered solutions. You see, drivers are, by and large, the primary cause of most all crashes. They are involved as the causal factor in the last activity that could have taken place to prevent a crash. So we've looked at more driver-centered solutions that raise motorists' attention to the hazard, and one of which on Pierce Ferry Road and Stockton Hill Road, a gentleman referred to the plethora of out-of-state visitors. That's a good thing, but it's also, from a traffic safety standpoint, a potential, it's something that is a gap in terms of certain driver expectations for traveling Mohave County roadways. Those coming from parts east, or especially internationally, aren't used to driving an open range. So we've taken it and explored solutions such as placing pavement markings in the pavement, which you see up on the screen, that are squarely in the driver's cone of vision. Signs, drivers, they simply don't catch every single traffic sign, but if you place pavement markings right in their cone of vision, really can't be missed. It's, again, another basis by which we're just trying to call motorists' attention to the hazard, especially in those high-risk areas.
Why don't you put some down in Golden Valley on 68?
Okay, Alvin, can you answer the question what happened to the cattle guards like at Estrella on Highway 68, or Mr. Latoski? Does anybody know what happened?
Yeah, I'd have to check with staff and get back with you on that. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, look forward to that answer. Considering the tribal overlook brings in approximately 1 million visitors a year, and the local rancher unloads a number of animals just off Pierce Ferry Road, would you consider it a recipe for disaster? If not, why? Oh, let me see. Anita, I think this one's yours. Not that you'll be able to answer for the rancher, but do you have any idea? If you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation for everybody, for the ranchers as well as the. Turn your mic on. We can't hear you. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Anyway, it's a difficult situation for the rancher as well as the public, and having people. And I'm not sure I understood the question completely.
This gentleman's from Meadview, and he claims, according to his question, that the local rancher unloads a number of animals just off Pierce Ferry Road. And he wants to know if you think that's a recipe for disaster, and if not, why?
Well, I think because it's not fenced off, it's a recipe for disaster. I think that we definitely need a fence. My ranch is Highway 93 trans exit. We have no conflict with cattle and being on the road. I've lived there for 25 years now. Twice we've had cows get on the road. Unfortunately, we were notified and got them off the road before anybody was harmed or they were hit by a car. So proper fencing is the answer to that disaster. We have, across our ranch, we have 52-inch fences going onto the highway, and we literally do not have an issue.
And Interstate 11 is going to go right through your ranch, is that correct?
Interstate 11 is going to go right through our ranch, and for years, and the two incidents that we did have cattle on the highway. One was there was an accident on the highway, and the people came running through our area and scared our cows, and the fence went down. So there had to be a reason for those cows to challenge that fence.
I think there's a false expectation of driving our state and county highways and not being challenged with an animal in the road. But even if it's cattle, burros, or deer, it's something you should be aware of at all times when you're driving, but you forget. And we get accustomed to having these nice ADOT fences on our interstates and state highways, and then a lot of people don't know when they get on a county road that it may or may not be fenced.
That's right. Blake Ranch Road that runs through our ranch is not fenced. And what I try to caution people that are going through there when I run into them, please slow down. There are cows on this road. And that's another thing is people need to be mindful that they're driving within a cattle ranch. And there's apt to be cows on that road.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I have, and I'll turn it back over to Supervisor Watson. If the Dolan Springs Meadview areas are considered open range, why is it then that Diamond Bar Road is fenced on both sides for 23 miles? Mr. Latoski.
That's a good observation and a very intelligent question. Diamond Bar Road was a substantial undertaking as it relates to its development and planning. That entailed securing certain rights-of-ways, new rights-of-ways over federal lands, and as a result of the federal government making those rights-of-ways available, an environmental assessment process was engaged in making those rights-of-ways available. And as part of the environmental assessment, a recommendation, a requirement, quite frankly, was that these rights-of-ways would involve the installation of wildlife fencing. I actually say not just open range fencing, but wildlife fencing. It's a special type of fence that protects not only encroachments from cattle, but also certain wildlife protected species. So in short, the right-of-way fencing was installed on premise of a federal requirement, a prerequisite to the federal government issuing rights-of-ways for the development and ultimate construction of Diamond Bar Road. Thank you.
Okay. I just received one more question. Can someone speak as to the breed of cattle out here and their body structure? They're not starving, right? No. So, Andrew, I'm going to let you take this one. You know, you've been kind of quiet, so, and then Anita can follow up if she needs to.
The question is the body structure of a cow?
Yeah, are they really starving out there? Can you explain what the body structure is with the breed of cattle that you see out here?
Well, the breed of cattle would vary, probably rancher to rancher. You have everything from Charolais to Angus to Hereford to, I mean, mostly you just know them by color, and there's crosses and all that. As far as body condition of a cow, I've even through this extreme drought, I've been pretty impressed with the performance of them. I haven't seen, some of them may have lost condition, but not nearly the condition I thought that some of them could have during this extreme drought if there wasn't some good range management out there and production management. So cows are not starving. They will eat, they'll find things to eat. The trick is balancing what they have to eat with your forage resources out there, but I can't imagine I've seen many cows starving out there.
Anita, you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I want to point out that these are range cattle. They are not feedlot cattle, so their frame is going to be thinner than what you expect in a feedlot. And no, they're not starving. They're doing very well. They're reproducing. They're healthy. And actually, the cattle in our western rangelands are the healthiest cattle in the world because they are on the open range. They're not clustered into small areas, so they don't pass diseases to one another. And these cattle, even though in your eyes you're not looking at when you see a cow with bone showing, they're not starving to death. That's the range cattle.
Okay, Supervisor Watson.
Thank you. I just received three. First one from Steve Robinson. Does incorporation end open range for the area inside the city limits? Mr. Esplin.
Mr. Robinson, I was going to single you out because I thought that you may bring up this question. I think it does, actually. And I was thinking if Golden Valley were to incorporate, if they were to become a city, they could pass their own laws and ordinances that would prohibit animals being at large, just like the city of Kingman, Lake Havasu, Bullhead City. Those are cities that have incorporated. And so you're correct. If that was what your assumption was, yes, if a city were to incorporate and become a city or a town, then they could pass their laws that would limit that. That's correct.
Thank you. Next question comes from Leanne Hoagland-Smith. Some residents believe ranchers make money from insurance, more from insurance than selling cows. Is that true or false? And can Anita Waite elaborate on the potential loss of the 10 cattle that were hit? Anita?
From what I understand, I haven't had that experience myself, and so I don't know if they get more for insurance than the cattle is worth, but I do believe it is the fair value of the cow.
Thank you. I see Jack Fuller in the audience, and I'll ask him.
That's good one to ask.
What's the normal recoup on a lost calf?
Can you come to the microphone, please?
After an extended period of time, if you can get an insurance company to pay you, it's for the value of the cow. And what they go by is the closest sale barn to you on that week that the cow was hit. And it's really difficult to collect from them.
So you're estimating the weight of the cow and...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
It's not that easy.
It's not easy at all. Nobody's making money on it. No rancher I know of is making money on it. We don't get collected for most of them because we don't get an accident report on all of them.
Right.
The ones we do get an accident report on, they're usually speeding when they hit them. if there's a speeding citation, that helps. And they usually are. The speed limit at night on Stockton Hill Road is 45 miles an hour. And they're usually going 65 or 70 when they hit them.
We're lucky if they're just going that speed, right?
And it takes months to collect from the insurance company. You have to prove to them what you've been talking about tonight, that it's open range. It takes a long time.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. The last one that I've got is from Ms. Morgaine. She wants to address this to Senator Borelli, who just made a comment, a public statement that he supports local control and he would work to change ARS 11-811, county zoning laws. I have been fighting the Board of Supervisors to pressure legislators to remove that restriction that privileges the 5 industries so Mohave County can rezone to protect our water. Senator Borelli has also made public statements that he has no legislative agenda this next term, and he does not believe the regulation needs to be changed. I have been fighting for local control of zoning to protect our aquifers. Mohave County Board of Supervisors said there's nothing they can do because of the state laws. Is Senator Borelli now willing to change ARS 11-811 to remove the state-driven mandate to protect the 5 industries to give Mohave County Board of Supervisors local control? Senator Borelli. Certainly.
Can I have, since there's a lot of questions in here. Well, number one, ARS 11-811 is a local control issue. Pursuant to this article, the Board of Supervisors may adopt zoning ordinances in order to conserve and promote the public health, safety, convenience, general welfare, zoning ordinances. Oops, I got the statute right here. General welfare, zoning ordinances, and all rezoning and zoning regulations, amendments, adopt. This is a local control issue. You have the authority to amend your ordinances. What we have to be careful with when we're trying to change the statute, what works good in Glendale and Mohave County won't play well in Peoria, because you cannot just make blanket law just for one specific area. We need to have that flexibility to push it down to the local control, because as communities change, the cities and the counties can be able to adopt ordinances to satisfy that change. So, you know, right off the bat, I mean, we'll have a conversation of what ordinances or laws that you do need to change to give you more flexibility. But as far as the 5 industries of Arizona, I mean, people have a right to work, and people have a right to prosper, people have a right to eat. So, like I said, blanket legislation just for one area, that's doesn't usually work well trying to get through the legislature. And as far as the statement about me not having a legislative agenda, just to clarify.
Senator Borelli, if I can interrupt, I'd like to keep this on open range rather than up.
Yeah, I know I wouldn't address the question, but I don't have a legislative agenda this session because I got elected to be the majority whip, which helps me be able to help out members. For example, Representative Cobb, if she's got a water issue bill that she's trying to get through, if she gets it out of the House, I can get that through the Senate, because that's what it's called, about teamwork at the legislature. As far as the aquifers go, I'm kind of confused because the city of Kingman has over 11 million acre feet of water. It draws 8,000 to 10,000 feet a year for 40,000 residents, and actually 50 to 60% of the effluent waters goes back into the aquifers. But if there's specific questions, specific laws that need to be changed, Ms. Morgaine can contact me, and we can look at it, we can discuss it, and you know, that's what it's all about, is having a conversation.
You know, while we're on that subject, Senator Borelli, can you just go through what it takes to change a law would have to write a proposed law and then find a sponsor, and then where does it go from there? Can you run us through the...
Right. Once we get a bill that someone wants to run a bill, you get an intro set. Hopefully you can get some sponsors on board if they want to co-sponsor it, and you put it in the hopper. Then it's assigned to a committee by the President of the Senate or the Speaker of the House. It gets assigned to a committee and a committee chairman. You got to convince the committee chairman to hear the bill, and then once it's heard, if it's heard in a committee, obviously, it's voted on committee, it can be amended in committee, it gets out of committee, and then it goes through a rules process, goes to the caucus, is discussed amongst the whole caucus on what the bill does, and then hopefully it gets to the Senate floor. We'll just start with the Senate. So hopefully it gets to the Senate floor. It goes through it goes through a second read and a third read, and then it goes to committee of the whole, where it's further vetted and debated. And then hopefully nobody kills it there. And then once it goes up for a vote, if the bill passes, then it goes over to the House and starts the same old process. It gets assigned to a committee, so on and so forth. And if it survives that gauntlet, then it goes up to the governor, and the governor hopefully signs it. If
then
it doesn't,
you made a comment. If it doesn't get killed, it can get killed
anywhere
along that line. And this is a state issue. It's not a Mohave County issue. So it's complicated.
Yes.
So thank you very much, and very happy that you're in your new position.
Please answer the question. The question is about...
Ms. Morgaine, this is my meeting. If you have another question, please write it down. I'd respect that very much. Okay. Like I was saying...
I'll discuss with her offline with us.
Yeah, maybe you two can meet after the meeting and not make this a political Sunny Morgaine thing. So the next question I have, thank you, Ms. Morgaine. Why isn't the real estate person telling the buyers that it's open range in Mohave County and that they have to fence their land? We don't have a real estate expert on the panel, but Elsie, can you come up and answer that, please? Now, Elsie is the only person I know in the audience that's a real estate person, so you're more informed than the rest of us, so please explain if you can.
All I can assure people is when they're buying in a rural area, the good realtors will tell them that. But there is currently nothing in our buyer's guide, and that is being addressed and hopefully corrected, because there should be a definition of open range in our buyer's guide. Those documents are statewide, and it's a thing that should be handled statewide with our documents. But anybody that's selling property in an unincorporated area is not doing a great job if they don't explain to people that it is a fence-em-out area.
Is it kind of buyer beware in Arizona? With
everything is buyer beware. You want to know if your septic's connected, then you ought to know if you can have cattle in your yard or not.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions from the audience?
Yes, I'm writing my question now. Give me a minute, please.
I have a question for ADOT. What is the cost comparison for the cattle guards versus roundabouts?
Well, depends on how many cattle guards you're doing.
And how many people it takes to train the cattle? Supervisor Bishop, do you want to go over some of the solutions that we've heard so far this evening?
Actually, I think that's a good idea. It's getting close to the cutoff time. I think we're ending this town hall at 7:30, and it's a little after 7 now.
Anita wants you. Anita wants you.
I believe Richard Hamilton has an announcement to make. Would you like to explain the meeting that you have been in with the BLM and the Mohave County Farm and
You have to use the
Livestock
microphone.
I'm going to face this way because I don't need to talk to them. They'll hear me just fine. It's not that I don't like them, I promise you, but you're the concerned citizens that want to know. So if I'm not speaking loud enough with the mic and so forth and so on. So again, my name is Richard Hamilton. I represent the Mohave County Farm and Livestock Association. So I'm here to speak on their behalf on some of these solutions that have been brought up today. Travis Holyoke's name has been brought up quite a bit, who holds the majority of the permits around the Golden Valley area for 68, correct, Mike? And I'm going to look at our membership they're going to let me know if I'm saying something wrong. What has happened with Travis Holyoke and the Bureau of Land Management is that they've come to an agreement. Part of Travis's allotment is not fenced off at this time. So the BLM is making arrangements with Travis Holyoke to fence off the BLM and the private land to where his cattle will stay on the BLM portion of the land. That's the biggest solution that we can come up with right now. Now, this is funded by the BLM, of course, for the fencing material. But what we also need is we need help from Mohave County. And I know Wes Bauer is going to try to help us. They can help us the best we can. But what we need is laborers. So if we can use trustees to help put this fence up, this will help with this solution as well. The more free labor, if you will, we get, the more money we can get from the federal government for the fences, to fence off BLM. Now, we've been hearing a lot about fences. We have 3 entities of fences here, and we're hearing them on the roads. We have the BLM, and we have the state, and we have Mohave County. Pierce Ferry Road, out by Meadview, Stockton Hill Road, so forth and so on, those have been brought up quite a bit. And as our county representative have said, in reality, it's the responsibility of Mohave County to fence that off. And I don't want Gary to shoot me. Everybody's afraid you guys are going to shoot us, but I don't want Gary and Supervisor Bishop to shoot me as well. But the reality of it is, it's the responsibility of the county on these other roads that we're talking about to fence those off. When it comes back to Travis again, the BLM is working with him. They have come to an agreement, and that's going to put that fence up, which will help solve a lot of this problem. It'll also help solve the problem with the burros getting on your properties as well. Now, I know we all love burros and wild horses, but we need to keep them in the BLM property as well. And as Officer Bauer has stated a few times, we need the cooperation, because we do have landowners out there that will say, oh, this pearl burro, we need to water this animal. Well, what that does is it brings the cattle in as well, and it takes them away from what we would call their natural water, or the water that we manage these cattle with. So we need your help and cooperation as well. On the burros, we need you to write letters to our local office about the burros of what a problem they are as well. Now, the BLM is not going to get rid of them, but their permit on the burros in this area is 4 to 5 times greater than what it should be. Now, I know there's not a representative from the BLM here, and I get that, but I am speaking on their behalf working with Travis Holyoke. Okay, so that is going to help with some of those problems. The other thing I would suggest, where Meadview Road got brought, the road to Meadview, Pierce Ferry Road, Stockton Hill Road, I highly suggest that you write your county supervisors and urge them strongly to fence that off.
Thank you, Richard. I won't shoot you in the back.
I'm not done yet. Again.
When's this fencing going to start? Next 10 years or what?
No, it'll start soon. And again, I had to.
What's soon?
Well, let me help you out. It could be anywhere between a week to 10 weeks. The thing of it is we're dealing with the BLM. And I'm going to tell you, your headache with your question is the same headache and question that we go through every day with the BLM. It's the federal government. So whenever the federal government decides to release the funds, they will. Now, let me tell you how to make this go a little faster. Complain to the BLM more. It's the BLM who you need to talk to. When you start talking to the BLM and you start screaming at the BLM, they will hear you and get it done quicker.
I called them 10 times when they hit that cow. You know what they tell me? We can't do nothing about it.
They're going to work with this. I promise you. If not, you can shoot me in the back.
They even know my name when I call.
I'm just letting you know the easiest way to do
Richard,
this is,
I won't shoot you in the back.
The easiest way to do this is, honestly, you really just have to keep contacting the BLM. Let them know you want this fence up. You heard it from me. This is going to happen. How soon it's going to happen, I have no idea. They just talked last week. They just came up with the solution. The solution is for you. That's what the solution's for.
What about the cattle that are going in a subdivision I still ain't got an answer on, about a subdivision where there, I can't put up.
Oh, I can answer that question. When you answered that, I got notes here for every question that came about. The person that developed the subdivision, that was his responsibility.
You can't put it in around my property. I live on a corner. I can't put barbed wire.
The whole subdivision.
I can't shoot that sucker that screwed up my ankle.
No, the whole subdivision should have been fenced off. That's the developer that made the subdivision. That's the best answer that I can give you. Well, they're right here.
Right there. You bet.
And thank you. Let me answer that question. You made a couple statements that are pretty close to the truth. Okay? One of them, though, is Mohave County does not have a responsibility to put fences up on the right-of-ways. Mr. Asplin.
That is correct. Mr. Latoski summed it up very well. I mean, it's a matter of determining the cost benefit and various things that he talked about and things like that. And we do not have an obligation to put up there. We do have an obligation to make sure that citizens are that we address citizens' needs and things, but it's tough to do that when you have close to 200,000 citizens, But
so an $80 million budget.
There is no statute that says we have to put up a particular sign or particular fence. That's correct.
Thank you. The second point is the arrangement with BLM and Travis Holyoke. BLM is proposing to cut his permit square mileage pretty drastically. So this is a decision that Mr. Holyoke needs to make. Is he willing to give up almost a third of his total permit? That's a big give.
That is correct. And in this meeting,
that's the rest of the story. But there's a couple more avenues in which you can look down the road for possible remedies to this. Number one, you can incorporate Golden Valley. Number two, you can fence it yourself along with the BLM folks. That's a possibility. I'll guarantee you, if you folks take on that responsibility to fence it, I'll make sure you get some cattle guards. I did that for Valley Vista, and I darn sure do it for Golden Valley. But just wanted to make sure that you folks knew that there are remedies to this. I don't think it's very fair for Travis Holyoke to give up 1/3 of his permit or just specifically to fix it.
Read the question then.
The boundaries are going to separate his BLM lease and the private property. And I believe this is all on and you guys help me out, I believe this is more on the south end of southwest corner, I guess you would say, of Golden Valley. And what it is, there's really either it's down or the fence is gone for the most part. That's why the cattle are getting into the private property. So they're going to come through and they're going to re-fence that or fence that. So that may be part of the rest of the story, but the BLM, what came out of the meeting was he's going to lose part of his allotment. He's not happy about it, but he doesn't want his cattle on your private property either.
Okay, let's take the southern boundary. Is that red wall? Is that...
I don't have any dimensions, none. What I'm trying to do is inform you of the outcome of that meeting between the BLM. We as an association of the Mohave County Farm and Livestock Bureau, we're there representing, we're there to help Travis as much as we can for whatever he needs. We understand it's a problem with the public, and we went to him and said, do you need help? Pardon me?
What about our safety?
Richard, we need to wrap it up. We're out of time.
That's what I want to find out.
No.
We've got one deputy for 20,000 miles or whatever, and I got hit. I didn't get shit.
I can't answer that question. I can't answer that. All I know is that with the association, with the Bureau, BLM, and Travis Holyoke, we're trying to come up with a solution for this problem. I'm sorry.
Now there's people getting hurt.
There is. But I'm going to tell you right now, there's a rancher out in Golden Valley. This happened probably 15 years ago. His cattle got out. Somebody cut his fence. Cattle got out, got on the highway. It's getting dark time. DPS officer turns on his lights. The cow still gets in the road. Somebody's still speeding, still hit the cow, DPS officer and myself are throwing flares out on this. I was not the rancher. Are throwing flares out on this, and somebody still hit the same dead cow. So we're trying to do the best that we can, but no matter what you do, there's people that are going to fly down the road and they're going to still hit cattle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. And thank you all for attending tonight. I want to wrap this up. We have one more question that from Ms. Morgaine, and then we're going to see if the panel members want to do a closing statement, and then we're going to say goodnight to everybody. So, Mr. Esplin.
Okay, just want to make sure that it's read. Make sure it is Senator Braley stated that he supports local control. ARS 11-811, Section D limits local control. To privilege 5 corporate interests, is he willing to remove Section D to give Mohave County local control to zone and rezone, period, based on our county needs? So just a little set this up so that everybody understands what the issue is. 11-811 is the zoning ordinance that allows counties to create zoning laws, you know, where you can build and how you can build and zoning space. That's what it is. Well, Section D exempts certain interests, those being railroads, minings, metallurgical, grazing, and other general agricultural purposes. Those are off limits from the zoning ordinances. So the question is whether the senator would be willing to remove that. I think he answered previously saying that there's a procedure by which things need to be moved and whatnot. Whether he wishes to add more than that, that's up to him, and he maybe could do it in the opening statement or not, but that's the gist of the question, if I understand correctly. So whether you want to answer that or not, that's up to him, but that's the gist of it. So.
Okay, he's shaking his head no. So that wraps up the question and answer period, but I just wanted to also bring up, because it didn't come up in the conversation or in the questions or anything, but these ear tags that Supervisor Watson put on the screen for you, they were offered to the ranchers back in 2015, and of the Mohave County ranchers that took Mohave County on the offer to get free tags for their cattle, there was only one rancher that did that. We're offering that again to Mohave County ranchers. So if a rancher wants the county to supply ear tags so that the cows will be a little more visible, it's not going to fix everything, but it'll help. And Mohave County is willing to do that, and if a rancher wants to approach Supervisor Watson or myself, we'll make it happen. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Does the panel have any closing statement anyone wants to make?
I just wanted to thank you guys for putting this together. It's great to have the dialogue and work towards a solution. We're all interested in safety. So.
Okay, and I think that's the key here. We're all interested in traffic safety, your personal family. We're concerned of the cattle, the livestock, the burros. I mean, it's a balance, and it's a sensitive balance, and we all have to work together to kind of reach that balance. As Mohave County grows in population, some of these issues will fix themselves by maybe Golden Valley incorporating, maybe Dolan Springs, Meadview. This area is growing, it's growing fast, and we look forward to the changes. If you come to the microphone, you've got time for one question, Richard.
Absolutely. I guess our question is on the ear tags. We've done that. Mr. Fuller and I were sitting here talking about that. That's been done, and it doesn't work. And so two things come out of this, and it's an opposite. Is this a cheaper way for the county to do it rather than fence on the highways? And, well, there's 3 of this. Rather than fence in their roads, Stockton Hill, Pierce Ferry, so forth and so on. Also, 2, who's going to put the tags in the burros? The burros are a problem as well. This isn't just a cattle deal, and in wild horses as well.
And the deer and the elk, yeah.
And so is the county also willing to take the responsibility if one of these animals has an ear tag and kills somebody? It still gets hit and kills somebody. As I said, I was with the DPS officer and watched one heifer get hit twice, and he had his lights on with flares.
I think when it comes to laws, it's the intent of the violation. So, you know, if a rancher puts these on his cows, I don't know if a jury would convict him for negligence because the cow rubbed it off. I mean, it's just one solution, one little piece of the puzzle. We're willing to do this for the ranchers if they don't want to accept this generous offer. they have their reasons, and they're good, valid reasons, Richard. So I think it's just a matter of a balance in a rural Arizona county that's growing, but not growing fast enough to fix all of these problems. Andrew.
Who's the manufacturer of those tags, and do they incorporate the reflective with any other types of the new higher
like
tech?
Paintballs, reflective paintballs?
So I'm guessing there's a reflective material, but there's now ear tags out there with chips and all that kind of stuff
This is just a sample that I picked up at a conference. It's made by Key Ranch Solutions, but you can get on the internet and there's all kinds of solutions out there. There's, you know, I mentioned paintballs because that's kind of a joke. I hope everybody understands that, but
maybe if the livestock producers would indicate to us something that would work, we could certainly look into that.
and we could form, Mr. Latoski, I'll put this to you, a road tax. Could we do that and then fence all of Mohave County roads and put in cattle guards with the transportation tax that's Mohave County only?
That's a good question with regard to taxation. With regard to taxation, what happens here is we are extremely limited as it relates to state statute allowing local government agencies to, let's say, for instance, pass a tax on fuel. That presently isn't an option at the local level as it was in Clark County. And as it relates to the transportation excise tax, it is my pretty firm understanding that any monies derived from a local excise tax for transportation purposes, I'm speaking sales tax, must be applied toward capital improvement projects.
What about a transportation tax that goes to the vote of the people?
That may still be subject to the same limitations in terms of the expenditure side. Obviously, it goes out saying that right-of-way fencing that's incorporated with a larger road improvement project, and we spoke about Diamond Bar Road, for instance, that can always be an option in incorporating into that greater transportation improvement project. But so at this point, we may have our options limited, but I don't want to rule that out either. So that's still maybe.
Okay, and then on Pierce Ferry Road between Highway 93 and Meadview, do you have an estimate of how many cross-intersecting roads are on that stretch of, what, 40, 50 miles there?
Supervisor Bishop, and of course there's a plethora of non-county maintained roadways, so I believe that the density is fairly extensive. I'll just venture, I'll guess on the amount per mile, at least four, maybe upwards of 6 to 8 per mile. So at least in the more denser area, closer to Dolan Springs and Meadview. There would be a substantial investment there in terms of accommodating a continuous fencing with cattle guard installations, which would have to occur on public and private roadways.
Absolutely. So if, hypothetically, if we found the money and we put a fence down both sides of Pierce Ferry Road, the roads that were maintained by Mohave County would have a cattle guard installed, and the non-maintained roads would then have a gate.
There would be the option of the gate as well, yes.
Okay. All right, well, that concludes this town hall. Thank you all again.
It's real short. My ranch is on the opposite side of 93.
All right, Linda, come up and use the microphone. And this is absolutely the last, and then good night, everybody, because we could go till midnight.
I know. My ranch is on the opposite side of 93, so when you leave town, my ranch runs over the Coyote Pass, about halfway down.
You're the one.
Yes, and I have bike trails that go through, and the bikers have told me, these are bicyclists, that if they put a trail through a gate or through my fence, I can't shut the gate. So I need to ask the ADOT guy who I talked to, because one of the fences is ADOT fence. Is that true? Do they have precedence over the ranchers and the property owners? We can talk later if you want to.
Yeah, let's talk so I can get a little more information on that.
That's fine. So. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Let's give a hand to the panel, and thank you for coming.